Welcome. This is a lecture looking at chemical injury. So we looked at physical injury, bruises, contusions, and now we'll see the effects of, could be ingestion of household cleaners or narcotics or even prescription drugs, what can happen, lead, all kinds of sources of chemical injury. So let's get right to it. So first of all, some kind of chemical injury, it could be accidental, but it could be a suicide attempt or homicide attempt as well, or a successful homicide. Now, environmental pollution is something that's hard to get a handle on, and it may be much more widespread than we think. Think about increases in cancers all over and other diseases and asthma, probably involved with our environments. Yes. And of course, intentionally using illicit drugs, you're just introducing some pretty bad chemicals right into your body. For those of you that collect bottles, poison bottles often have ridges on it like that, so that even in the dark or a blind person knows it has, it's poison, yeah. So exposed to these chemicals can be ingestion, inhalation, or even contact, like cleaning chemicals or ammonia or such, pesticides can enter through the skin. And even when we think about therapeutic drugs, you can easily overdose if you don't understand the amounts they're supposed to take. The elderly sometimes with dementia have really need help taking their pills, or sometimes even miscalculation with Tylenol, because that can be really hard on your liver. And it turns out there's other drugs that contain Tylenol. So it's a mistake you can make is, oh, I took 500 milligrams of Tylenol. Oh, but I also took this other cold medicine and it has it in it. So that can definitely happen. All right. So chemical injury can be acute if it comes on, it comes on rapidly. Yes, like carbon monoxide. You're breathing that, and if you keep breathing it, you're eventually going to succumb. I mean, in a rapid time frame. Chronic exposure to chemicals is more long-term. So lead poisoning is going to build up, and you're going to see behavioral problems, things down the road. Yeah, and some, like a nuclear plant disaster, would have acute effects, and then with the radiation you have long-term effects of various cancers. Yeah, so drug abuse, some of it is like opiates, and it's actually a real big issue, of course. You can buy Vicodin, Oxycontin, and all these things on the street. And then, yeah, other compounds that people cook, crystal meth, even fentanyl is an artificial opiates made in the lab, and botanicals, marijuana, and such. All these things are abuse. And talking about drug abuse, I mean, it's going to have negative effects on your life. I suppose if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But normally, we'll see with drug abuse, it takes greater and greater amounts, and you become, addiction means that you have withdrawal symptoms if you don't take it, and so it usually leads a spiral of very bad things happening in your life. So detecting this, normally a person, if they have some kind of poison issue, we'll call poison control, and if it's serious, you'll go to the emergency room at hospitals, and they can pump your stomach, give you activated charcoal, things like that. So that's how they're detected. And chronic environmental issues hopefully are dealt with at the state level, the Environmental Protection Agency, and all these things. If there's a toxic spill, killing fish. If you want to dig clams, even here in Scarborough, you can call this number to see there's certain periods of time, especially after it rains, because everything washes off the lawns and everything goes down the river. And these bivalves, these clams, they filter the water so they can accumulate toxins that way. And so there's periods of time that you can find out. So we count on the government monitoring water quality so we know when it's safe for us. Yeah, and if you look at Poison Control Center, look at their data, you find that a lot of calls they get, they're asymptomatic, and you can see 99% of the time you're gonna survive the poison that you called for. It's good news, right? Looking at some data here, you can see that even death, even intentional poisoning is less than 1%. And to die accidental poisoning, people that call these lines, it's pretty unlikely. So look at 10 substances most frequently involved in poison exposures. So analgesics, yes, we're talking about both illicit and non-illicit drugs to relieve pain. Then household cleaning products. Yeah, some of it is inhaling, some of it's just contact. You got this dermatitis that happens, and you want to call poison control to figure out what that is. Cosmetics and such. Some of these are children ingesting, right? And then other drugs, antipsychotics and depressants, antihistamines, beta blockers, things like that. Kids are swallowing those little batteries too, and cause a lot of issues too. And pesticides, definitely. Those, rat poison and such is poison for a reason, and people will, if you're not careful, you don't want to ingest any. Yeah. All right, so what do you think? Things probably you'd expect, looking at chemicals that would be cause poison control would be called. Now these are deaths in the United States. What causes them? So yeah, opioids is up there. Heroin, fentanyl, oxycontin, oxycodone, all these things are huge. The main cause is respiratory depression. They stop your breathing. Yeah, especially combined with alcohol sometimes. Yeah, antidepressants, various street drugs, alcohol, acetaminophen. That's just Tylenol. Yeah, it's up there. Beta blockers and things like that. Yeah, SSRIs are various often depression medications like Paxil or Zoloft or Prozac. So yeah, so the deaths, opioids and various sedatives, sleeping pills, antipsychotic pills, antidepressants. You take those, usually it's about breathing stopping, and if no one's around, you'll be found dead if you can't be revived. Yep. And naloxone, I think we'll talk about that, but if you have an opiates overdose, naloxone is a drug that will bring you right back. All right, so accidental exposure in children. Children, unfortunately, don't know what they're doing. They're dumb. Kidding. But they find a shiny pill, they could eat it, especially some of these children vitamins or even Tide Pods. They're colorful, they look so. Accidental poisonings in children because they can get into stuff, and they're always getting into stuff, and they're curious, and so. And then parents, of course, are really worried. Your teenager, who cares? Baby eats something, you gotta call right away. And yeah, they like cosmetics, personal care, cleaning products. I think they can get into, are most likely going to be the substances that are going to cause poison exposure in toddlers and such. Indeed. Yeah. And then alcohol. It's often in our society just taken for granted. It's such a normal drug that's been so normalized. I say that if you come from alcoholic parents or spouses, it's much more serious. But in a lot of society, alcohol is thought to be something that's legal, so it shouldn't be a problem. But it causes major problems. I think like 100,000 deaths are related to that, not even including driving and alcohol-related deaths. But if you drink too much, it can cause alcohol poisoning and death. Absolutely. And alcohol combined with a lot of drugs can lead to respiratory depression causing death. And alcohol causes risk-taking behaviors, and STDs is a lot related to alcohol behaviors and criminal behaviors related to alcohol. Yeah, and then gastritis and pancreatitis and cirrhosis of your liver. Drinking raises your blood pressure. So, alcoholism is hard on your body. Yeah, especially on your liver and your kidneys. Depends on the person too. Some people get fatty liver and get cirrhosis, and so there's a genetic component too. So environments, exposure to various things in our environment, pesticides in our food, We breathe in all kinds of things in our environment, from exhaust and radon in your house, and mercury in the fish that you eat. So all these things are difficult to quantify, difficult to point the finger at, but we're insulted by all these carcinogens and chemicals that lower our immune system and cause damage. And the data is tough, and it's probably very widespread that our lives and our diseases are caused by environmental chemicals that we don't, that are safe, that are on our food, or that are safe, supposedly. So definitely. And there are increase in asthma and emphysema and such, especially people living in urban environments, definitely correlated to that. And so the Environmental Protection Agency, sure, looking at these things, various chemicals. We had lead in our gasoline. Now we have unleaded gas, but we were breathing lead in that way. Lead was in our paint. Nitrous oxide comes from a car exhaust. It goes through a reaction in the air and turns into nitric acid. Sulfur oxide is burning dirty coal, turns into sulfuric acid and rains down as acid rain, right? And even particulates. We're talking about just that looks like a haze over Los Angeles and China and Mexico City. These are some of the worst places for air pollution, where even the normal outdoors is above the level to be safe to be breathing. And there's millions of people in these cities. And so in China, especially Beijing and China, a lot of industry with just spewing out this particulate matter. They wore masks before COVID because it's a direct relationship between breathing this smog and having respiratory issues. Yeah. If you have asthma or any kind of chronic respiratory problems, you can't live in a big city. You're just going to be triggered. And the people living there that grow up there are getting respiratory diseases. Yeah. And then it can be more locally, just having a space heater in a tent or something like that. It's burning kerosene, and carbon monoxide can build up and be there. All right, carcinogens in the environment. Of course, number one is cigarettes. And throughout this course, I've not been a big fan of smoking. You can see it's a huge cause of so many, not just cancers, but so many issues in our society in terms of health. So cigarette smoking and obesity, if those things were eradicated, we'd have such a healthier population. Yeah. And a lot of this, the evidence for a lot of our other chemicals, whether they're carcinogens or not, are ambiguous. We used to think about, look at artificial sweeteners. Some of those were thought to be cancer causing. Carcinogens in our environments causing cancer. Yeah. All right, what are some manifestations of chemical injury? Well, it depends on what we're talking about, how you were exposed to it. Was it inhaling or surface contact? The dose, exactly. And then, and even like, how is this chemical gotten rid of? Is it broken down by the liver, the kidneys? All these make a difference. And for people with liver failure or kidney issues, the dose that's deadly is much smaller because they can't get rid of it as easily. So that depends too. Just like in drugs, you need to know what's their renal function, what's their hepatic function, because some people can degrade drugs much faster than others depending on those functions. And you can OD easily if your kidneys can't get rid of it. A normal person would take the drug and they would pee it out. The other person would just build up in their system at much higher than therapeutic levels. Yeah, and just basically chemical injuries, toxic effects. That means usually dose dependence. You can have a nice relationship with the more toxin, the more damage that is done. And then we just got done, well, depends when you saw lectures, but talking about allergies and hypersensitivity reactions. In this case, it's not necessarily dose dependent. It depends a lot on your individuality. So if you're eating a PB&J and you have a peanut allergy, much different than me eating a PB&J, right? And it's just can be, it's not really dose dependent. It's just, are you exposed to this? And you go through this big, your IgEs, remember, you go through a big reaction that can be anaphylactic. So diagnosis chemical injury, you can look for symptoms and signs. If you ingested something, probably be vomiting. Could be burns. If you ingested something like lye or toxic, you can see burns around the mouth and the esophagus. Look for neurological impairments, definitely. And if you're unconscious, that's a pretty good clue too, that you've got some kind of injury that could be due to drugs or chemicals. Most importantly, to the physician, to the healthcare person, is identifying what the chemical agent was. And it's not always easy, of course. Sometimes it's obvious. Yeah, so again, looking at this diagnosis, look at neurological examinations to take a look to see if you can find something there. If the urine output is down or kidney function is down, that toxin could have damaged the kidneys. Respiratory depression, I mentioned a couple times, that's a big thing with narcotics and a big cause of death. And then if something that's going to be diarrhea or vomiting is going to be, an obvious sign or symptom. And then yes, caustic substances will burn the mouth. Lab tests, there can be further tests, look at blood levels, try to figure out what the agent was, and can you chelation or something to suck it out of your system or not. Yeah. But it's good to have some kind of clue. You can't just come in and say they were poisoned by something and just test for everything, right? So, and some cases it doesn't matter to find out exactly what it was, if the treatment is the same or if you get better. But if you're criminally or you're looking at particular therapies that you need to know if it was this or that, then you need to go search the home, look and see what it was. So household agents, many things underneath your sink right now in your bathrooms are corrosive or have toxic substances, preservatives, phenol, formaldehyde, all these things that don't sound very good to ingest or have on your skin. Even bleach, you should wear gloves when you do that. Yeah. And ingestion for kids, of course, is always a big issue. And if you have kids, you probably have locks on your cabinets that they can reach. You don't care about the top cabinet, but the lower ones, they can't get into things. Then you move things up to the top shelf so they can't reach them. Yeah, child-proof caps were invented to keep kids out of medications where they could easily overdose. Aspirin is something that is, you don't give it to children really. You're really careful because of this Ray's syndrome. We decided as a rare disease that aspirin can kill the child. So they were real careful with that, including other things that have salicylic acid or aspirin products in them. And now acetaminophen, you can see that was up there. Tylenol is one of the top killers. So acetaminophen is toxic to your liver at high doses. So it's a wonderful drug, for as an analgesic for pain and such. But it has an overdose level that can easily be met. And sometimes, like I say, you could have 2 different medications that contain acetaminophen, and that could bump you over and causes liver damage and death even. So, and suicide, looking at using Tylenol, it's going to work. It's going to kill off your liver. All right. So, indeed, suicide. People often take sleeping pills or pain pills, things like that, and it causes depression of your breathing, which is what's normally going to kill you. Too much iron is deadly too, especially children. And these little Flintstone vitamins look like candy, and if you eat all of them, you get an iron overdose. And they've got a very serious hospitalization, and they got to get that iron out. It could damage your heart and your kidneys, things like that. Yeah, what's in these cleaning things? Yes, acetone, chlorine. Oh yeah, definitely. Naphthalene, I believe that's mothballs, things like that. If you ingest those, so all these things can be, contact or inhalation, or obviously if you drink any of them, can cause some serious problems. But they work for cleaning, they should not be put into your body. Yeah, and so you'll see people, and some people, it's their job. They work food industry or cleaning, and they're exposed to these cleaners. And so that's where OSHA and then regulations and making sure you have proper protective equipment is so important. Yes. Yeah. Some interfere with hormone production. It's true. Pesticide. Some pesticides, some organophosphates, they mimic estrogens. And I know from frogs, they're in fish, they're feminizing. Even the males are turning their testes into ovaries because of this. And so it's interesting too. And also our birth control pills and even our cocaine, illicit substances, these things aren't broken down by our waste treatment plants. And so you can look at, the outflow of sewer plants in big cities and find peaks on the weekends of drug use. Just looking at that, it's really fascinating. And some of these hormone agents, they don't get broken down and they get into our waters because that's where the water goes after the sewage and waste treatment plant, and it will affect our fish and our frogs. Yeah. And of course, carcinogenic, cancer causing. All right, let's talk about carbon monoxide. So carbon dioxide is all around us. We breathe it out. Carbon monoxide binds to hemoglobin pretty strongly, stronger than oxygen. So what happens is that if you're breathing carbon monoxide, it starts filling up those oxygen sites in your hemoglobin. And with each cycle through, more and more hemoglobin cannot carry oxygen. And so you'll get blue fingers. Eventually, autopsy, they turn cherry red. It's interesting. But this carbon monoxide is odorless and colorless. And so that's why it's such a danger, is that it will build up in a tent or maybe above your garage. If you have a bedroom where it can leak up there. And of course, for suicide reasons, you sometimes euthanize animals. Carbon monoxide will eventually cause you to pass out and to die because lack of oxygen. And you want to get someone out to fresh air. And then with medical attention, you can give them oxygen, a little bit of carbon dioxide to keep their breathing going and flush that carbon monoxide out if you catch them on time. Yep. But some of the symptoms will be, headaches. You'll feel headaches and nauseous, dizziness. You don't feel right. And then look at your situation. Are you somewhere with little ventilation where there's possibly a faulty heater or something like that? Get outside, and then you'll be able to blow off the carbon monoxide and be okay. But if you pass out and that source is still there. So it comes from burning incompletely fossil fuels. So kerosene heaters, things like that are the main culprit. And you can look at the deaths by this peak in the wintertime when people are using heaters, that are faulty, or even your furnace that's faulty, and carbon monoxide levels can build up. So you can get a detector that will scream when you have high levels. So carbon dioxide measured as a percentage of hemoglobin saturation instead of oxygen, right? Above 50%, you can't carry half of the oxygen carrying capacity. Yep. And the fires, deaths due to fires are not usually caused by the flames and burning. It's caused by gas inhalation, carbon monoxide. Yeah. And they can tell if you, on autopsy, if your carbon monoxide levels are high, that means you were alive. You were still breathing when there was carbon monoxide in the fire. If there's none in your bloodstream, it means you perished, and then, you perished before you could breathe in the carbon monoxide. Indeed. So, and then low levels, chronic low levels. So what about smokers? Carbon monoxide in cigarette smoke. So they chronically have carbon monoxide levels that are too high. I mean, not deadly, but they're chronically have high carbon monoxide. It probably causes severe issues, looking at liver, bone marrow, all these things like that. Or living with automobile fumes, sure. So carbon monoxide, unless you live, out in nature, with no combustible engines and such, you're exposed to this, and some more than others. When you live in big cities, there are all that exhaust from buses and cars and coal-fired plants. Yeah. And so, not quantified, not easy to diagnose, this low-level chronic carbon monoxide poisoning. Acute is when you're poisoned, you could pass out and die. All right, lead. Lead, there is no acceptable level of lead. And the biggest issue, the saddest issue, is in children, because lead, even the smallest amount, causes neurological different disabilities. where they won't socialize, they will never be intellectually up to their capabilities, and there's no curing it. Lead poison, that's it. It's lifetime. It changes your brain. So you mainly get it, we think about now, Flint, Michigan. They had pipes, and then it's terrible, just for money reasons, they switched, and the lead pipes with there's like acidity leach that acid out, and now these lead pipes are leaching lead into their water, and they have to drink bottled water. So the only thing they can do is just replace all the lead pipes. Yeah, I don't even want to get into that. It's a horrific response to that as well. But paint chips are a big thing. We used to put lead in our paint, in our gasoline. And so in older homes, you need to disclose if you sell a home, is there lead paint, and kids, would chew on it, and that's how they could get lead, through that paint. Yeah. It's not an issue now as much, except with older homes, because we don't put lead in our paints. Yeah, but it affects the brain, the nerves, everything. Yeah. So looking at lead exposure, other heavy metals too, but lead is well known. We just cannot get lead in our body. But aluminum too at high levels is not good either. So look at children, behavioral problems, lower IQ, learning disabilities, anemia, kidney damage, decreased growth. Even in adults, memory problems, kidney problems, reproductive problems, joint problems, yeah. Indeed, permanent mental incapacity. Yeah. I just bring this also in our environments. Now, if you go fishing in Maine, you can't use lead sinkers because, and then our bullets and shotguns are, instead of using lead, are using other metals, because when you throw all this lead in the environment, the ducks, come and eat it, and they'll ingest the lead, and they will get lead poisoning. Bald eagles will get lead poisoning. You shoot a deer, or an animal, they come and scavenge on it, they ingest the lead, you'll find it with neurological problems, flopping around and dying. So we're trying to get lead out of our gasoline, out of our ammunition and our sinkers out in the environment, because it's not just humans. Lead is pretty toxic to vertebrates in general. All right, agriculturally, I thought about this more when I was in Iowa, but here in Maine, I guess we have potato fields, blueberry fields. All right, but a lot of agricultural chemicals are very toxic, and you get people, especially in other countries with less stringent laws, that are spraying DDT and horrible things with just minimal equipment, no gloves, no respirator. At least he's got, a cloth over his face, but who knows if that's sufficient for whatever's in that tank. So exposure to these things, organophosphates and ammonia, and these are really bad. Pyrethroids are really bad too. Pesticides, herbicides, even fertilizers, nitrous issues can cause serious problems. So in the agricultural world, both their fertilizers and their pesticides and herbicides, they're made to kill their sides. They're made to kill insects and weeds, and they can also affect our own cellular metabolism. All right, adverse drug reactions. Almost any drug can cause adverse drug reactions in people. And so you should know if you have a penicillin is a particularly common one, if you have a penicillin allergy. And it turns out people overestimate if they have these allergies. Really, you want to ask the patient, well, what is your effect when you take it? You're like, well, yeah, and then, and so you get to that, but people will think they have allergies often if they don't. But, you can have, if you have a serious allergy, again, even a small amount causes anaphylaxis. And so you want to look, at a history. They will ask you, do you have any allergies? Because they want to avoid giving you that more than once. Yeah, and some of the issues with adverse drug reactions is that often the therapeutic level is close to the toxic level. Yeah, so you need a certain amount in order to have the effect, but damn, you're close to that toxicity level. And some are based on body weight, and some are, your metabolism could differ, and so you're playing with fire there when you look at some of these drugs that need to be at what is a lethal level. And then some people vary. We're talking about in pharmacy using pharmacogenetics, looking at individualized medicine, because people have different enzymes and different kidney and liver functions that are going to make them deal with the drug differently. So if you give a drug to a patient that has liver and kidney failure, they can't get rid of the drug and they're going to be overdosed on it. And then children versus elderly, you need to know these things if you're going to give a good dose of the drug because it matters. A therapeutic level is a level of a drug in your system that is doing its job. Subtherapeutic is not enough, and then you can get toxic levels above that. Yep. And we know a lot about drugs in terms of looking at what happens if you OD on it. Normally, if you stop taking it, you should be able to go back to normal, and so they can adjust dosages here. All right. And then drug addiction, drug abuse, drug addiction, definitely. You can see, look at a couple definitions. You can see the drug abuse here is the use of illegal drugs or even legal drugs in an inappropriate manner. So, hey, I'm just taking Vicodin. It's prescribed by it's a prescription drug. No, of course you can abuse it if you're taking it not for pain, but to get a certain effect. Substance use disorder with APA, impaired control, social impairment, risky use. And then a hallmark of addiction is withdrawal symptoms if you don't take it, and increasing tolerance to the drug. So you need more and more to get the same effect. It changes your chemistry, your brain chemistry, and withdrawal symptoms and increasing tolerance are part of that. And what most of these drugs, when we look at drugs of abuse, what they do is they target centers in your brain that release reward chemicals that make you feel good. Yeah. And so the deal is if that happens, like, oh man, I got this great high. And then you come down from it and then you want it again. And it turns out every time you do it, you change your brain chemistry. So you need more to have the same effect because the number of receptors change like that. And then if you continuously use it, you're hooked on it, you try to quit, you feel like crap because your brain is used to getting that baseline of that good feeling chemical. And if you don't, you feel like crap. And so, yeah, you got to get to the other side where your body's making more of the regular and it's down-regulating the receptors. But that's a tough withdrawal period for a lot of people and prevents them from quitting the drugs. Yes, I think I said it all right there. These are some commonly abused drugs and some of the withdrawal symptoms. Yeah, people look at marijuana. Some people say is not addictive and it doesn't have withdrawal symptoms, but I believe it does. Opioids definitely withdraw. Oh my gosh, yes. Cold flashes, restlessness, pain. If you take stimulants and you get hooked on it, you stop taking it, you get depressed, you feel tired, and you just want that stimulant to make you feel normal, your new normal again, right? Yeah, and try to quit tobacco. I've never smoked, but you're irritable. I know people that try to quit irritable, and you have a lot of issues getting over that addiction. And here's the most commonly used addictive drugs. Marijuana, spice. Look at these over-the-counter ones. That's big now, looking at fentanyl and oxycodone, hydrocodone, these things like that. Alcohol, obviously, thrown in there. Amphetamines or speed. Anabolic steroids, sure, and especially kids wanting to play football, be able to lift more. Bath salts, just do horrible things to your brain and cause psychosis. They're cheap and some of them are legal some places, yeah. And cocaine, of course. Of course, yeah. From the 80s, it's been around a long time. Yeah. Hallucinogens like Molly, LSD, heroin making a big comeback. People hooked on opioids. Heroin's cheaper now than buying some of these pills, and so they'll start doing heroin, which is a horrific idea, you know. Inhalants, oh my gosh, yes. People sniffing paint and glue. Ketamine and Earofon, this is a date rape drug, yeah. And nicotine, so nicotine and alcohol are on there. It's definitely addictive drugs. Yeah, and so you're going to see some patients will do drug-seeking behavior. So they will try to visit several doctors and clinics, go to different states and different doctors, and try to hide who they are. So and now there's more better tracking. Looking at the pharmacies, where people fill. If they have to use an ID to get these things, they're going to pick up where they got Vicodin from two different pharmacies, things like that. And but some of these things people will excuses. They'll come in, saying they're allergic to something. They seem to know a lot about drugs, exactly what they want, and so they're going to point you in that direction to try to prescribe it to you. And then they'll talk about, oh yeah, they got stolen, or my dog ate my drugs, they fell down the sink, all kinds of things. Just things that anything they can do to try to outsmart the healthcare system to get more drugs. So you guys will get used to this kind of behavior. And you need to make the call too sometimes. If you're not sure, do you decide not to prescribe them pain medication and you're told do no harm to help others? So yeah, interesting. And so drug abuse, major problem, a drag on society, both not only emotionally and physical toll on the people that are put into addiction and the money involved, but the lost work and the lost quality of life and the broken families. So if you think about mental health and look at drug use and addiction and the damage it does to society. Yeah. And fatal overdoses are rising, especially with opiates, things that are prescribed. You got fentanyl and carbfentanyl. There's even like one's an elephant tranquilizer that's being cut with other drugs, and the overdoses sadly happen because you're just not sure. People cutting it are not chemists, and you could easily OD on these things. Yep. And the overdose, yes, and of course, long term, it has huge effects on your blood pressure, in your heart, and your lungs, and infections from shooting up and things like that. So endocarditis, right, from putting a bacteria and putting it into your bloodstream. And so, yeah, sure. And so be able to recognize drug addiction is obviously track marks. If you see needle marks that can be infected are a big issue. Yeah. And you'll see a lot of infections. I mean, local infections is systemic. I talked about endocarditis. You were taking needles that sometimes sharing needles, dirty needles, and pushing the fluid that you sucked up from a spoon in some McDonald's bathroom possibly, and you're putting it into your bloodstream, and there's no thought about sterility in some drug abusers' mind because they just want to think about that fix. And so, a lot of hospitalizations you'll see are from infections from drug users. Yeah, amphetamines, cocaine, these are stimulants, so you're going to definitely see high blood pressure and anxiety, agitation, psychosis. I mentioned some of that you can get. Yeah, definitely. So things that any healthcare professional should be aware of, be able to recognize these signs of someone being high. And finally, yeah, this kind of abuse comes with a lot of health effects, especially long-term. You don't see really old drug abusers. They just don't live that long. They either get clean or they die. You can't live decades of doing daily cocaine. Coming up with the money is usually dangerous, and then the effects on your body. So sadly, people get hooked and addicted, and again, they have two choices. They continue to live that life. It's usually a downward kind of spiral in their life, and you're either going to die of an overdose or put in jail because you were stealing to pay for the overdose, or you get treatment and you get someone that cares about you, or you're able to get some treatment and then you can get clean. So that's your path. There's no I'm going to be a drug addict and live a normal healthy life with a family and grow old. Yeah, definitely. Yep. And diagnosis, of course, we have lots of drug tests. You can look at urine for metabolites, and your hair follicle will store some drugs for even longer periods when it's out of your system. All right, so chemical substances. Ended up with illicit drugs, but started out talking about environmental drugs and lead and carbon monoxide. So, all right, there you go.